Hi, welcome to Pajamas Media. I'm Richard Miniter. Today I'm talking to Robert Spencer. I'm sure you've read his books, The Truth About Muhammad, and he's got a new book coming out called Religion of Peace, Why Christianity Is and Islam Isn't. Or did I get that backwards, Robert?
No, that's actually it. Yeah. It's designed to reply to the moral equivalence arguments that we hear all the time. When I speak about Islamic jihad and quote the writings of the Islamic jihadists explaining what they're doing and why and how they want to establish Islamic law over the world, people immediately start to talk to me about Christianity.
Right.
As if somehow the sins of Christians in the past makes it somehow easier to deal with the fact that we have this global jihad movement. I'm trying to deal with several things at once, of course, in the course of the book. One is the moral equivalence idea that all religions are equally capable of giving rise to violence.
Which only atheists believe.
Which I think is designed to divert attention away from the real threat that we face today. Another attempt to divert attention away, which is the whole Christian theocracy scare. The idea that there are right-wing Christians poised to replace the Constitution with biblical law.
But what's fascinating is this very crowd that's worried about so-called Christian theocracy, and they want the separation of church and state, which of course you and I are both for. They don't have any problem with the conjoining of mosque and state.
Yes.
They have no problem with the banning of piggy banks in Britain because it might offend Muslims.
Yes.
It's where this political correctness just behind that veneer is Sharia.
Exactly. It's remarkable how people who have dedicated decades to driving Christianity out of public life in the West are now welcoming Islam into public life in the West.
So you started off writing about Jesus in the Quran, and then made a much more lengthy, over the last 25 years, study of the Quran, of the Hadith, and of Islamic jurisprudence. Is that right?
That's correct, and it was just a matter of personal fascination. My family is from that part of the world.
Your family's from Turkey, are they not?
Yeah, what is now Turkey, and they were, when I was growing up, my grandparents would tell me stories about life over there that were uniformly positive, as a matter of fact, Rich.
Was it kind of romantic? I mean,
captured my imagination, made me want to travel over there, made me want to read more about it. So that when I actually did go to college and met up with some Muslims from Saudi Arabia.
So they really kind of painted a picture of this kind of the melodic call to prayer.
Yes.
And
yeah, that's something actually that my grandmother, I remember in particular my grandmother remarking about the immense beauty of the muezzin in the minaret calling to prayer, and she would hear it in the morning in her village, and I thought it was remarkably beautiful. And so this was just one example of many things that captured my imagination and made me think, well, this is something I want to know more about.
Sure.
I remember in the early 80s when I was first reading it that I was captivated by the arresting poetic quality of some of the chronologically early chapters, which are actually the latest parts, the last parts of the book.
Oh, we should explain to the viewer that
yes.
The Quran, as it's currently constituted, is not in chronological order.
That's right.
But by the length of verse, or by the length of
chapters. So the surahs are arranged, with the exception of the first,
from the longest,
generally from the longest to the shortest.
That's right. And so these are out of chronological order.
Yes.
And if you're a real scholar of Islam, you need a separate guidebook that tells you what was published when.
And nobody is entirely sure about that. There are different reconstructions of the chronological order of the Quranic verses, but the general agreement as to which ones came in the early part of Muhammad's career in Mecca, which ones came later in Medina.
Right. You're a critic in the sense of G.K. Chesterton's ideal critic. You love the thing you criticize.
Of course. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't have been studying it for all these years.
Long before 9/11, you were studying.
Absolutely. I was consulting with some people on a private basis, some of whom I'm not at liberty to name, in the 90s about Islam. And one of them invited me after 9/11, actually urged me to write my first book to try to correct some misconceptions about Islam.
Onward Muslim Soldiers.
Islam Unveiled was actually the first, and then Onward Muslim Soldiers came out the year after that.
Well, your critics might not like your conclusions, but in a way you're promoting understanding in that you're spending so much time with the Quran, the Hadith,
yes.
the foundational texts of Islam,
and
reading them fairly closely as a scholar, as you are a scholar.
So what I'm trying to do, yes. What I'm trying to do is...
So why does a scholar like you provoke so much fury?
Well, I think that there are really people who don't want these truths to come out, who are lying about them. Some of them are pretending to be Islamic moderates themselves, and they don't really want Islamic reform. Obviously, you can't reform something you won't admit needs reforming. in order to admit it needs reforming, you have to identify the problematic areas, and that's what I've done. Any genuine Muslim reformer will not only not hate that, but will applaud that, because he will see that as support for his own efforts to identify the areas of Islam that need reform and to try to formulate some positive way to deal with them.
Well, I urge you to pick up Robert Spencer's books for Pajamas Media. I'm Richard Miniter. Robert, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich.